This week on the show, we talk about our recent trip to FOSDEM. We discuss the pros and cons of permissive licensing and cover the installation of OpenBSD on a dedibox with full disk encryption, as well as the new Lumina guide repository, and explain ZFS versus OpenZFS differences in this week's episode of BSD Now. BSD Now, episode 233, FOSDEM 2018, recorded on the 7th of February 2018. Hello, I'm Benedikt Reuschling.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're not only back from FOSDEM, but we're also packing a lot of stuff in this week's episode, so you should follow along with us with our first item in the headlines this week, FOSDEM trip report, of course.
Yep, so both Benedikt and I were at FOSDEM in Belgium over the weekend, and so we had quite a bit of fun and met quite a few people. On the Friday before FOSDEM itself began, we had a FreeBSD Developer Summit, this year organized by Benedikt, that was sponsored by the FreeBSD Foundation and organized by Benedikt, like I said, with some help from Christoph, who had organized the two previous ones. We had 21 people attend, a good mixture of FreeBSD committers, mostly from ports, and a number of guests in order to get some more outside ideas and stuff. After we did introductions, we collected a number of topics and discussed them, including the new plans for what the release roadmap for FreeBSD might look like, whether we want more frequent releases or maybe not do long-term support on every major release, and some other ideas. And then we had dinner.
Yeah, important.
Yes. On Saturday, that was the first day of FOSDEM. We got there early and set up the FreeBSD Foundation table. We had a number of different flyers, stickers, copies of the FreeBSD journal, some excerpts from other editions of the journal, some specific pages on Google Summer of Code and FreeBSD in research, as well as a Raspberry Pi 3 demo showing a video on a tiny screen of the history of the FreeBSD source tree going back to 1983. Mm-hmm. Again, as last year, our table was next to the Illumos table. I think that was actually specifically by their request, so thanks them for organizing that. So they give us someone to talk to and chemistry with. But it also allowed us to expand that relationship, and actually we did some collective debugging there. They're working on the port of Beehive to Illumos, and we're seeing a couple of issues. So we fired up my laptop running FreeBSD beside it and attempted to recreate the problem there to see if it was something with Beehive or something specific with their port, and found that the problem didn't exist on FreeBSD. So that gives them some clues in where to look. We also debugged a problem with the OmniOS installer. Turns out they ran into the same problem we did with the Sandy Bridge era Lenovo laptops not liking to boot from GPT without EFI. And since they don't have EFI yet, Thomas Soom, a FreeBSD committer who's originally from Illumos, is still in the process of porting that support over as part of his work to bring the FreeBSD bootloader to Illumos.
Oh, excellent. Didn't you also save a Z-pool with backup labels or something?
No, we were just proving that if you didn't install from FreeBSD and then booted Illumos, you could import the pool and so on.
Ah, excellent.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Making sure that pools were compatible. We knew that they were, but we were just curious what happens if you created the pool under FreeBSD and then installed Illumos to the existing pool and booted it. Mm-hmm. Mostly worked, although I think it had some trouble mounting /var because it was not empty, which is a Illumos specific issue.
Okay.
But it was good to talk to them and to work on a couple of different problems there. Ended up with a small patch to FreeBSD to ensure that that particular laptop model, which is not one that's popular in North America, so not one I had ever seen. It's actually the precursor. It's a Lenovo X1, but it's basically the precursor to the X1 Carbon. That's now supported by the FreeBSD installer properly, and the fix a similar fix should go into the Lumos installer, allowing them to work on those machines as well.
Ah, great.
So it's interesting to watch somebody have a problem I had before and be able to share the solution for it.
And I like the bootloader that they, redesigned. It's the FreeBSD bootloader, but of course with the Illumos logo.
Provided their own ASCII art, yeah.
Yeah, that looks stylish.
Yeah. Meanwhile, at the table itself, people visited, many, many hundreds of people, and we answered lots of questions about FreeBSD, handed out lots of material in the form of the pamphlets and information pages and copies of the FreeBSD journal, and lots of swag, mostly stickers, even some tattoos and a bunch of stuff. There should be a lot more FreeBSD stickers hanging around now.
Yeah, server rooms and laptops.
Yeah. We have many helpers at the table, which was nice. Meaning, I was there most of the day on Sunday. On Saturday, it allowed me to escape when I needed to relax a bit and see a few talks before I had to give my own talk.
Yeah, that's good. Because otherwise, if you're two people at the conference manning the table, you have no idea what's happening at the other conference, or you cannot even go to the bathroom or something. You just have to be at the table and glued there.
Yeah, it was also helpful to have some other people, like Rodrigo, who organized the dev room on Sunday, was available at the table. Some people were able to ask their question more fluently in French than English, and so having someone that could answer or translate made things go a lot quicker as well. Yeah. I saw the BSD history talk that was in the main track in the Jansen Hall at FOSDEM. That must have had 2,000 or more people in the room. It was a huge room and it was very full. So it was good to see that many people having an interest in that topic.
Okay.
So that was good. And then we had the BSD dev room going on all day as well on Saturday.
Yeah, I was also mostly at the table, and I couldn't get to the dev room until Alan's talk, but I'm sure to watch the recordings. And also met a lot of people, talked to them, handed out stickers and flyers.
Yeah, so in the dev room, it started at 10:30 with Deb Gutchen talking about the FreeBSD Foundation and how that works and what it does for the projects, especially from people from other BSD projects or who aren't familiar with FreeBSD to understand the role of the foundation. Then Jörg Sonnenberger from NetBSD talked about NetBSD and Mercurial, and they're working on the changes there, basically importing their very long-lived CVS tree into something else. And then Sevan Janian also talked about BSD from scratch, building NetBSD specifically for your needs. And then Luca Pizzamiglio talked about POT, his jails and ZFS tool framework. And then Joran Makic talked about CBSD, a different isolation manager that works for jails, Beehive, VMs, and Zen on top of FreeBSD. Then Benny Siegert talked about package source on Chrome OS. So using the NetBSD packaging system on a non-BSD, non-Linux operating system. And then Antoine Jacotot from OpenBSD talked about syspatch, their base system maintenance mode tool. Vincent Delph talked about using OpenBSD to build a home alarm system, which is quite interesting. Sadly, I couldn't watch that talk because the room was already full. The classrooms are only so big, and because of fire code and so on, they put the precise number of chairs in the room that they're allowed to have people in the room. And so if you can't find a seat, then you have to watch the videos later, or the live stream. I guess there is a live stream. We could have watched that in the hallway, I suppose. Then I came in and gave my talk, ZFS Advanced Integration, building ZFS for servers, laptops, embedded, or appliances, and some of the interesting things you can do with any of those. And then Robert Farron talked about building or configuring the build base on FreeBSD, making things easier for a user. And then Benedikt Reicheling talked about reflections on teaching a Unix class with FreeBSD.
Oh yeah, that guy. That was super popular because I was a little bit worried that because of the last, it was the last talk of the day that not many people would attend, but more people kept coming in.
At a regular
nice.
BSD conference, we usually don't start talks after 6 o'clock.
And it was less of a technical talk. And I thought, well, teaching is boring to people, but there was a lot of people there who were interested in the idea or the stuff that I'm doing there. And you can find the video recordings from both our talks or the other talks already. So they were pretty much cut from the live stream. And I rewatched my talk to just see, how I was. And it was good.
Yeah. I know a bunch of us were downstairs waiting for you so we could go for dinner. And we're like, oh.
Yeah, unfortunately,
he'll be a while.
After the talk.
He's been answering questions for 15 minutes and there's still a line.
Yeah, I dragged some people along with me so I could talk to them because it turned out that one student or one attendee was a student at the university once and, he wanted to say hi and, how are things there? And that was kind of nice. Yeah, sorry for keeping you waiting.
And then we went for dinner.
Oh, yes. Dinners in Brussels was interesting.
And that worked out quite nice. Had a good time. Had some beep and bop. And that was just Saturday. And then came Sunday.
Second day of the conference, yeah. So there was no dev room on this day, so we could totally focus on the FreeBSD table, which was as popular as the day before. And we had more time to talk to people directly. And we also, so I had a chance to talk to Deb Kutkin a little bit about the foundation stuff, which we normally cannot do in person. So that was also interesting to do. And knowing that there are people taking care of the table while we're there, or not there actually. So we had a little bit of time to do the business side of the foundation. Yeah, that was nice. So thanks for the helpers at the table.
Yes, we managed to get rid of all of the stickers that we brought, which was pretty good. And I think all of the copies of the journal, and I think in all, I think Deb shed over 100 pounds of paper.
Oh, yeah. She brought an extra suitcase just for the table, and wow, that is certainly much lighter bringing it back.
On the way home, exactly. But check out the FOSDEM schedule to see all the BSD talks. There's also all the other rooms, and most of the videos are already online thanks to the heroic efforts of the people that volunteer at FOSDEM. So we thank them very much. Yes, it was a good time. And special thanks to all those who arrived early and participated in the FreeBSD Dev Summit on the Friday. And also all those who... super big thanks to Rodrigo Osario for organizing the BSD Dev Room, and to each of the speakers for making sure that we had enough content to get a whole day slot rather than just a half day slot.
Yep. Because otherwise, if no one submits talks to a dev room, then this dev room gets sized down or doesn't happen at all. And if you see that some of the dev rooms run both days, like the Postgres dev room ran on both days, Saturday and Sunday, so maybe we can get that done next year.
If we were going to do that, I imagine Rodrigo would want someone else to be responsible for the second day.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Or maybe they could, one does morning and one does afternoon each of the 2 days or something, just because it's a lot of work managing everything.
Oh, yeah, certainly. You had a little indicator how much time you had left as a speaker. So
yep,
that's a new
as
thing.
well as they had the cards when you have 15 and 5 minutes, and one to remind you to repeat the question for the recording and all of that. So I think thanks to Baptiste who ran some of those cards during my talk and made sure I did the right thing.
Yeah, the usual. Yeah, so thanks everyone, also the people who made FOSDEM possible, and hopefully see you next year. Okay, next up is a NetBSD Kernel WSCon's IOCTL vulnerable bug class. So that sounds complicated, but still interesting enough to include it in the show.
Yep. So basically, this is a blog post where they discuss a new class of bugs they've discovered in the NetBSD kernel based on incorrect coding style that has an integer overflow during input validation. And basically, it's called a class here because there are actually 17 distinct vulnerabilities, but they're all basically the same thing. So it becomes a bug class. The author of the vulnerability wrote a Cosinell script to automatically detect 16 of the instances and an additional 5 false positive. And then further, they manually found another bug that isn't an integer overflow, but in fact is code that has no input validation at all, rather than just incorrect validation. So they have their slides from their talk at Black Hat. It's full 41 slides.
Okay. Oh yeah, here we go.
Or rather, actually, they have slides here from a talk given 16 years ago in 2003 at Black Hat, talking about the same class of bugs.
Ah, okay. So it's been a while. That's yet still relevant.
So it has a list of the files where the bugs were found. And they have some examples here. They have a display map for the screen. You can see the red, green, and blue colors for the text, the number of elements in an index. And then here it does if the index is greater than or equal to 2, or the index plus count is greater than 2, which results in an integer overflow. Because if the count is the end of the number, and I guess count is input from the user, so they could provide a number high enough that it will overflow.
Oh yeah.
Next is because in set cursor is called via the IOCTL, index and count are under control by the user who's calling the octal. The input validation should be simple. Neither index or count or the sum of index and count should be out of range. In the code above, we have a simple integer overflow when count is close to the maximum unsigned integer. The input validation fails, leading to a large size in the copying API. This will lead to copying as much memory as permissible from userland into the kernel. So then it looks at what OpenBSD did to fix this, and basically limits it to if count is greater than 256 minus whatever the index is, then it's invalid.
Yeah. Okay.
So then it shows how they used the Cosinell tool to find this vulnerability, and it wrote a set of expressions, and it he runs that through the code and looks for any bugs that might exist in that fashion. And you see it finding more highlighted in red here.
Yep, and there's also a link to the NetBSD source mailing list, of course, where they note that they fixed those integer overflows. And, well, updating your NetBSD is always a good idea to get those updates and fixes.
Yeah, specifically it says, I discovered this bug class during the InfoSec public code review sessions. We were looking specifically at the NetBSD kernel. I found a couple of these bugs, and then after the session was complete, I went back and realized the same bug was scattered in other drivers in a total of 17 instances. Oh,
okay. Yeah, this seems like an issue with copy and pasting and reusing code.
Yes, like I think one of them was, I saw one of the files that it was affected was the all-winner driver for some hardware that didn't exist when this bug was introduced. But, the console code was based on an existing one, and therefore ended up with the same bug. They report that reporting the bugs was easy, less than a week from reporting the specific instances of each bug to patches being committed to the mainline kernel. Thanks to Luke Mewburn from NetBSD for coming to the code review session at InfoSec and coordinating with the the NetBSD security team.
Yep. So some security bugs there were fixed.
This week's episode of BSD Now is brought to you by IX Systems. Head over to ixsystems.com/BSD Now and check out the ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. If you get in touch with them and talk to them, they will custom build you the best machine for your workload. They're quite good at it. They've been doing it for a lot longer than most hardware suppliers, and they happen to have a more intimate knowledge of open source and BSD specifically to help make the right decisions when you're building the server hardware.
Yeah, because most of the servers are unique and the use cases are very unique. They vary from customers using it as a backup system or using it more for CPU number crunching in big data environments or high-tech, whatever. And if you as a customer specify to IX Systems exactly what your use cases are or what you are going to use this server for, then they can better help you tailor-made a server that's exactly built for your needs.
Well, yeah, like even two servers I buy from IX are often for completely different purposes. If I want a storage server, it's like I need lots of RAM, I need this. I'm storing video, so I don't need any SSDs, maybe just for the OS, but I'm not going to use an L2 ARC or a slog because I'm doing large contiguous video reads and writes, and so there will be no advantage there. However, when I'm building one of our video servers, it might need some SSD to handle DVR. Actually, allowing people to rewind a live stream requires keeping small chunks of that video around, but they rapidly change, right? As we add new video, we delete old video, and we have to have SSDs to keep up with, 20 streams all recording and removing chunks constantly.
Oh, yeah.
The IOPS. So we build entirely different machines in that case. We only need this much RAM, not that much, but we need maybe 10 gig networking and high-speed SSDs. And then, if we're building a router, again, our needs are completely different all over again.
Sure. And that's exactly what IX Systems is doing. It's not selling you something off the shelf, and no single solution ever fitted most people. So they tailor-made every system towards the use case. And if you're not in the server space, then you might look at the FreeNAS Mini or FreeNAS Mini XL for your little business or desktop or home use, even to have a little backup system with FreeNAS installed and backed by ZFS.
Yes. Or if you're really not interested in kind of rolling your own solution and running the open source software on the server yourself, they do have TrueNAS. If you want to just buy an appliance and use it for storage, then it works. In this particular case, they have a case study from a company that wants to use ZFS for their video editing. And in this case, TrueNAS is proven, and it speeds up their multimedia and entertainment editing process. So there's one here called Indie Store Mimic is an application that allows you to use the Avid bin locked video editing application with a TrueNAS. The bin locking feature prevents the active project from being overwritten, allowing multiple users on the network to make changes and work on the same project. So this way, if you have a central storage thing for all your video, it prevents two people from trying to edit the same video at the same time and corrupting each other. Yeah,
that would be bad. So yeah, give IX Systems a call, tell them we sent you, and we're sure they'll build the system that you're happy with.
Yeah. So the TrueNAS is capable of bandwidths in excess of 25 gigabits per second, which is sufficient to edit multiple 4K 60 frames a second video streams at one time.
Ooh,
and that's
nice.
With one TrueNAS, and you can combine multiple head units to get more speed. And it's all backed by ZFS, so your video files are not going to have problems if the power goes out while you're editing them. You got self-healing, copy on write, snapshots, so you're protected from things like crypto locker, bit rot protection, and even human error protection. If you're in the video editing world, I'm sure you've heard the story of what happened to the rendered version of Toy Story when it went away and had to be
yeah.
So you remember to take some snapshots of your video thing throughout the process, so you can always undo something that goes bad.
Yeah, snapshot early, snapshot often.
Indeed.
All right.
But check out the blog post.
Yeah. They wrote up something for this. On with the show. Permissive licensing is wrong, is it? So there is a blog post we have here, which this is eerielinux.wordpress.com. They write that a few weeks ago they've been attacked by some New Zealots on a German tech site after speaking in favor of permissive licenses. Unfortunately, discussion was not possible there because that would require they would actually communicate instead of simply accusing the other side of vile motives. Since they actually do care about this topic on the blog, and the reader asked for a post about it, they commented on that a little while, so here we go. The first part runs or tries to sum up the most important things about the topic itself. He deliberately aims for an objective overview that tries to be not one-sided, so being neutral or more or less neutral. The second part would then contain his points in defense of permissive licensing. So what license? So why software licensing at all? This is a good question. So why do we do this? Licenses exists for reasons of protection. If you're the author or inventor of some software, a story, or whether a product, you get to decide what to do with it. You can keep it for yourself, or you can give it away. If you decide for the latter, you have to decide who may use it and in which ways. In case you intend to give it to a potentially large group of people, you might not want to be asked for permission to XYZ by everybody, because that causes a lot of email and communication. That's when you decide to write a license which states that you are allowed and explicitly disallowing. So you say you can do this with a product or service, and this is forbidden. Most of the well-known commercial licenses focus on what you're not allowed to do, usually things like copying, disassembling, reverse engineering, and things like that. Open source licenses, on the other hand, are meant to grant the user licenses, like the right to redistribute, while reserving some rights or only giving permissions under certain conditions. Then they usually make you claim responsibility for using the software. For these reasons, licenses can actually be a good thing. And if you've got an unlicensed piece of code, you're not legally allowed to do anything with it without getting the author's permission first. And even if you got that permission, your project would be risky, since the author can withdraw it later at any point in time. A proper license protects both parties. The author doesn't get his mail account full of email asking for permission, and he's safe from legal trouble if his code breaks anything for you, and at the same time, you have legal certainty when you decide to put the code in long-term use. And now the question comes, permissive versus copyleft in a nutshell. So in short terms, permissive licenses usually goes like this. Here you are, have fun. Oh, and don't sue me if it does something else that you did not expect. Well, yes, it's that easy and there's little to dispute over. So copyleft on the other side sounds like this. If you ask somebody in favor of copyleft, sure, you can use it, it's free, just keep it free, okay? Also quite simple and not too bad, eh? Other people, however, read the same thing like this. Yes, you're free to use it. Just read these 10 pages of legalese and be dead certain that you comply. If you got something wrong, we will absolutely make you regret it. So the GNU General Public License, or GPL, is the most popular copyleft license in use. And it got more and more complex with each version, so they're currently at version 3. And to be fair, it had to, because it was necessary to react new threats and loopholes that were coming up in the past years. The GNU project states that they are committed to protect what they call the 4 freedoms of free software. So the first freedom is to use the software for any purpose. Second freedom is to change the software to suit your needs. The third freedom is to share the software with your friends and neighbors. And the fourth freedom to share is the freedom to make changes that you like to make. So these are the freedoms that every supporter of open source software should be able to agree to. So what's the deal actually with all the hostility and fighting between the two camps then? Let's take a look at permissive licenses, which is the BSD license, or a BSD license is a permissive license. Unlike the GPL, the BSD family of licenses began with a rather simple license that spanned 4 rules. The original BSD license. It was later revised and reduced to 3. Modified BSD license, and a modern BSD license uses even just 2. So they got the license smaller and smaller, whereas the GPL kept growing. So did you read the GPL version 3 that we linked here in the show notes? And if you are reading the GPL code, you really should. and also if you're using that. In case you don't feel like reading all of it, at least take a look and grasp how long that text is. So just scroll through to the end and see how much text this is. And so the question comes, what's the problem here? There are essentially two problems that cause all the trouble. First one is the question of what should be subject to the freedom that we're talking about. And closely related, the second one is where that freedom needs to end. Ironically, both camps claim that freedom is the one important thing and it must not be restricted. The GPL is meant to protect the freedom of the software and enforces the availability of the source code, hence limiting the freedom of actual persons. BSD, on the other hand, is meant to protect the freedom of human beings, who should be able to use the software as they see fit, even if that means closing down former open source code. And the GNU camp taunts permissive licenses as being lax for not providing the protection that they want. The other camp points out that the GPL is a complex monster and that it is virulent in nature. Since it's very strict in a lot of areas, it's incompatible with many other licenses. This makes it complicated to mix GPL and non-GPL code, and in the case where it's legally possible, the GPL terms will take precedence and necessarily be in effect for the whole combined work. So who's right then? That totally depends on what you want to achieve. There are pros and cons to both. And in fact, we're only looking at the big picture here. There's also like the Apache license, which is often deemed as kind of a middle ground. Then you may need to consider the difference between weak, like the LGPL, as well as a strong copyleft, the GPL. Licenses is a potentially huge topic. But let's keep it simple here, because the exact details are actually not necessary to understand the essence in our topic. And in the next post, they'll present the stance on why permissive license is a good thing and copyleft is more problematic than many other people think. So we'll cover this.
Maybe we'll go into the second post next week.
Yeah, this is a second episode. So for people interested in it, read the full blog post for this week, and we'll cover the next one the week after this.
Yeah. So in general, I see the point of both sides. There are pros and cons. The fact that they end up being incompatible is really inconvenient. For me, as a programmer, the most important thing to me is that people actually use the code that I write. And so a permissive or copy-free license, like the BSD license, suits me best. I make the code, and I'm happy to let people use it. The only caveat in the BSD license is you can't take this code and then claim you wrote it. Leave my copyright message on the code and reproduce it in the documentation. That's the only restriction. Whereas if my concern was I don't want anyone to change this code and not feed those changes back to me, then I would decide to choose a GPL-like license that says that, this code is open and anything you derive from it must also be open. But I prefer the BSD license because, when a company is going to embed some computer software in something, I'd rather they used BSD license code that was written by people I know than to try to write something themselves and get it wrong.
Right.
There are quite a few advantages to having a kind of standardized, high-quality base of code that does most of the things you need, and having that be reused over and over again, rather than having each vendor decide to write their own version of it because there was no permissively licensed version.
Mm.
Yeah, there are some advantages to the GPL in some cases.
Well, certainly.
Mostly with the GPL v3, they've done what's called the anti-TiVoization. The TiVo was a set-top box that allowed you to record shows off TV on a schedule, and it was based on a Linux kernel, but all of the TiVo software was on top of Linux, but it wasn't part of Linux, and so they managed to escape the clauses of the GPL.
Mm. I like the comparison that one license gives freedom to the code and the other gives the freedom to the people using it. I think that is a good comparison and makes it easy to grasp what the differences are. And ultimately, each developer has to decide for himself or herself what license they put their code under. No one can decide that for them. That's their personal preference.
Indeed. The The sad part is just because of the incompatibilities, you end up with these weird situations that have come up before. Where I think it was somebody ported I think it was an OpenBSD Atheros wireless driver from OpenBSD to Linux. Being under OpenBSD, it was under an ISC license, which is very similar to the BSD2 clause, but slightly different wording. But when they put it into Linux, they relicensed it to the GPL license because the GPL is basically a superset. It provides all the freedoms of the BSD license, but adds more restrictions. And so they licensed the bits they added to it under the GPL, which meant that those changes could then not come back into OpenBSD unless those same restrictions were applied. And because it's viral, once that happens, those restrictions would have to apply to all of OpenBSD, basically. And that's just not acceptable. And it's the same reason why they can't integrate ZFS into Linux as well. Because while the CDDL license allows you to take that code, compile it, and license that binary any way you wish so that you can make a commercial appliance out of it or something, the GPL requires not only that you have access to the source code, but the source code be licensed under the GPL, not just any license. And obviously, because licenses don't allow you to just remove their restrictions and put your own in, the CDDL code ends up being incompatible with the GPL.
Yep. So all these problems have been around for a number of years now, and ultimately it's as I said, the programmer's decision to make the choice which license they use. So, time for our news roundup this week about an OpenBSD installation on dedibox with full disk encryption. Sounds good.
So this is over on poolp.org, which is, I think, one of the developers behind the OpenBSD SMTPD. They say, I run several dedibox servers at online.net, all powered by OpenBSD. OpenBSD is not officially supported, so you have to do a bit of a workaround. Running full disk encrypted OpenBSD, there is a piece of cake. And as a bonus, my first steps with a brand new booted machine. So it actually kind of walks you through the process. So step 0 is choosing your server. In this case, they chose the SC 2016, which is a SATA machine, and an XC 2016, which is SSD based. And so those are all going to be running OpenBSD.
Cool.
So step 1 is to boot into rescue mode. Once they SSH into the rescue mode, then they download the OpenBSD mini root file system and DD it into the hard drive. Then, once that boots, they'll be on the installer, and they can boot and install on SoftRaid. So instead of running install once the OpenBSD installer starts, they drop to the shell, use fdisk to set up the partition table, disk label to create the slices, and then bioctl to actually set up a SoftRaid. And they set it up to be encrypted. At this point, we're ready to perform a regular install. Remember, that'll be on SD1, which is the virtual device backed by the crypto, rather than SD0, which is the raw hard drive. So they run install and follow the steps. Once they've written out all the files to the SoftRaid, it's now time to actually boot OpenBSD for the first time. So now they reboot on the encrypted system. The root slice being encrypted, you'll need to type your password in every time you reboot. Connect to the serial console, you should see the boot prompt asking for a password. The N glitch is still around, so either you break out of password by typing enter, so you can enter and set TTY-COM1 trick, or you can do as I do and synchronize with the N keystroke to delete and type password really fast. And then it boots and you're dropped to the login prompt.
Okay, halfway there.
Yep. Then they go through some bonus steps of setting up do as instead of sudo, disabling the root account, updating the system with syspatch, adding their SSH keys, getting that set up, disabling password authentication with SSH, and then reboot. So we boot the new up-to-date system with the latest kernel, and voila. Aside from the downside, having to type your password every time it boots, you have the upside that everything on the disk there is encrypted and means that no matter what someone does with physical access to the machine, they cannot read your files unless they have your password.
Oh, excellent.
Indeed.
Okay.
Actually, when it comes up in a minute and it's time for talk about our other sponsor, you could use these exact instructions there as well. And
yeah, it's not limited
BSD
to
on a fully encrypted disk on DigitalOcean.
Yeah, this is certainly not limited to the boxes they were using, the dediboxes. All right, we have a January 2018 development project update from the FreeBSD Foundation. And yes, as 2018 started, there were Spectre and Meltdown, which pretty much threw all our planned development schedules completely overboard, or at least delayed them, because the people had to spend their time, or are still spending their time, with the vulnerability mitigations. But we wanted to still give you an update from the Foundation side. So the issues affecting most CPUs used in servers, desktops, laptops, and mobile devices are in the news. I guess no one is around who hasn't heard this by now. The hardware vulnerabilities, known as Meltdown and Spectre, allow malicious programs to read data to which they should not have access to. This potentially includes credentials, cryptographic material, or other secrets. They were originally identified by a researcher from Google's Project Zero, and were also independently discovered by researchers and academics from Cyberus Technology, the University of Technology in Graz, the University of Pennsylvania, University of Maryland, Rambus, the University of Adelaide, and Data61. So these vulnerabilities affect many CPU architectures supported by FreeBSD, but the 64-bit x86 family of processors from Intel and AMD are the most widely used and are high priority for software changes to mitigate the effects of Meltdown and Spectre. In particular, the Meltdown issue affects Intel CPUs and may be used to extract secret data from their running kernel, and therefore it's the most important issue to address. So we at the FreeBSD Foundation collaborating with Intel, and under this relationship, we participated in a briefing to understand the details of these issues and plan the mitigations to be applied to the x86 architecture supported by FreeBSD. We also made arrangements to have FreeBSD security officer join the briefing so that they also get the gist of what's going to happen. It is through the generous support of the Foundation's donors that we're able to dedicate these resources to focus on these issues on demand as they arise. So Foundation staff member Caustic is an expert in FreeBSD's virtual memory system, as well as the low-level x86 details, and is developing the x86 kernel mitigations for FreeBSD. Again, he had planned to start different work in the beginning of the year, but yeah, he had to focus on this now. But it's just delayed. It's not completely put aside. The mitigation for Meltdown is known as Page Table Isolation, or PTI. Caustic created a PTI implementation, which was initially committed in mid-January and is available in the FreeBSD current development repository already. And this is the same approach used by the Linux kernel to mitigate Meltdown, so this is relatively easy. But one of the drawbacks of the PTI mitigation is that it incurs a performance regression. So Caustic recently reworked the FreeBSD's use of Process Context Identifier, or PCID, in order to regain some of the performance loss incurred by PTI. And this change is also available now on FreeBSD Current, so thanks for that, and the work that you did there, Caustic. The issue known as Spectre comes in two variants, and variant 2 is the more troubling and pressing one. It may be mitigated in one of the two ways, by using a technique called retpoline in the compiler, or by making...
retpoline, it's like a ret trampoline, kind of a return trampoline sandwiched together as one word.
Yeah, that's the
So red Pauline.
Code name for it. Red Pauline, okay. Or by making use of a CPU feature introduced by a processor microcode update. So the both options are under active development, and Cost Exchange to implement the CPU-based mitigation is currently in review. Unfortunately, it introduces a significant performance penalty, and alternatives are preferred if available. And for most cases, the compiler-based red Pauline, see, I learned that, mitigation is likely to be the chosen mitigation. And having switched to the Clang compiler for the base system and most of the ports collections some years ago, so FreeBSD is well positioned to deploy Clang-based mitigations. So the efforts we put in a couple of years ago are now starting to pay off, although there's still a little bit of work to do to get the full base compiled, or not only compiled but also available with Clang only. But coming back to the issue here, FreeBSD developer Dmitry Andrich is spearheading the update to Clang LLVM in FreeBSD to version 6 in anticipation of the official release, and FreeBSD Current now includes an interim snapshot of that. He has been assisting with the import, so this is a report by Ed Mast, of course, particularly with respect to LLVM's LLD linker, and will support the integration of red Pauline. And this support is expected to be merged into FreeBSD in the coming weeks. So Ed is also busy doing that, not only because of his role at the FreeBSD Foundation, but also his dual role also in the FreeBSD security team. And also the Foundation's co-op students have participated in response to these vulnerabilities. Mitchell Horn is developing a patch to control the PTI mitigation default setting, while Arshan Kanifar benchmarked the performance impact on the in-progress mitigation patches. And in addition, Arshan and Mitchell each developed changes to the FreeBSD toolchain to support the full set of mitigations that will be applied. Yeah, those two also had different plans to do over their co-op internship with the Foundation. But again, this is just either they delay that or we give it to other students because this is more pressing currently.
Yes, I know we talked to some people at FOSDEM who lost their whole Christmas holidays to working on this type of stuff, and instead will get their holidays in March or later, and why we might not see them at BeehiveCon.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is the outcome, or the bad outcome in this case, but yeah, it can't be helped. These mitigations will continue to be tested, of course. They will be benchmarked and refined in FreeBSD Current before being merged into stable branches and then being made available as updates to FreeBSD releases. Details on the timing of these merges and releases will be shared as they become available, and we'll cover it also in the show, of course. And we in the Foundation would like to acknowledge, and also Ed in his role at starting this issue or making it work in the Foundation and coordinating all these efforts. We would like to acknowledge all of these in the FreeBSD community who have participated in FreeBSD responses to Meltdown Inspector, for testing, reviewing, and coordinating x86 mitigations, for developing mitigations for other processor architectures, and for the Beehive hypervisor, not to name it as the last one, and for working on the toolchain-based mitigations as well. So there's a whole lot of areas that need to be fixed, and this requires a lot of people's interaction and coordination to make this all work together. And we're very grateful for these people that they're working on this, and for the Foundation to sponsor these so that they can spend their time on making that available. Yeah, I wish we had more interesting news of stuff we are working on, but I'm sure in the couple months that are coming in this year, you will certainly look at the FreeBSD Foundation's efforts with something, oh, I didn't know they were developing that, or, oh, that's a nice effort that they're doing in this area. So stay tuned for more news, and as they become available, we'll cover it on the show.
But yes, donate to the FreeBSD Foundation to ensure that they can continue to do this work, especially in a volunteer project like FreeBSD. Having a couple of people who are paid and can drop everything they're doing and focus on a problem like this is immensely valuable. We'd probably be months away from having patches for PTI and Inspector stuff if we didn't have Caustic working for the Foundation full-time.
This week's episode is also sponsored by DigitalOcean. Head over to digitalocean.com to get your cloud virtual machine called a droplet in DigitalOcean's cloud. And you can sign up right now and use the coupon code FreeBSD now and get a $10 credit to your first virtual machine.
Nice. Like we said, you go there, you click, you start it. Within 55 seconds, it's up and running. You get a full HTML5 console access, so you can use it to do like we showed in the previous tutorial and erase the Linux or whatever operating system that comes on the droplet and put fully encrypted OpenBSD on it if you want. Or they already have images of FreeBSD on UFS or ZFS already built. But if you would like the disk to be encrypted, you can do very much the same process as the OpenBSD tutorial. And if you look back in the older show notes, we have tutorials on doing regular OpenBSD and NetBSD installs and even Dragonfly on droplets as well, in addition to FreeBSD from scratch.
Yep. And they, sorry.
They recently changed their pricing so that you get more RAM for less money now, and introduced some new droplet sizes, including their special flexible droplets, which for the same $15, you can choose whether you want more RAM, more CPUs, or a mix of both.
And they're available in 8 regions around the world. San Francisco, Toronto, New York, of course, London, Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Bangalore, and Singapore. So this is relatively good because they have a global distribution, and you can have your little droplet run in a data center that's relatively close to you, and making sure that you have the good bandwidth connection to that. And also you can spin up droplets that have a certain application already running, be it your WordPress blog or some MongoDB for some web development. So you can start these right away, similar to an empty droplet that just has the operating system of your choice on it, and get you running a blog or some other service up within seconds even. You just need to do a little bit of configuration, and it's all then connected to the internet. Also, they have a lot of stuff in the community section, like tutorials and Q&A. So if you're not sure how to properly configure a certain service or how to set up a full backup on DigitalOcean's cloud, there's an article on that just 16 days ago, and that pretty much walks you through how to do that. And it's all free. You don't have to pay for any of these tutorials, and they're written by the community. And these are pretty extensive and cover a lot of different topics and products and services they provide.
Yeah, they have quite a bit of different stuff on here between the community-written documentation, their own documentation, and lots of additional services like floating IPs and such. So our next story is the guide to getting started with creating your own Lumina themes.
Oh, yeah.
So Ken Moore, the author of Lumina, team leader anyway, is pleased to announce the beginning of a new sub-series of blog posts for the Lumina project, Guides. The TrueOS and Lumina projects want to support our users as they use Lumina or experiment with TrueOS. To that end, we've recently set up a central repository for our users to share instructions and other how-to guides, kind of similar to like what DigitalOcean has there, where user-submitted guides get put into a nice big repository and easy to find for everyone. Project developers and contributors will also submit guides to the repository on occasion, but the overall goal is to provide a simple hub for instructions written by any Lumina or TrueOS user. We'll make it easier for users to not only find a how-to for some procedure, but also a very easy way to give back to the community by writing simple instructions or more detailed guides. Their first guide to get the whole thing started was created by the TrueOS linebacker with technical assistant from our own Q5Sys, who's also the producer of BSD Now. In this guide, Terry Tate will walk you through the steps necessary to submit new wallpaper images to the Lumina theme collection. This procedure is fully documented with screenshots of every step along the way, walking you through the simple procedure that only requires a web browser and a GitHub account. The end result is a guide was that Terry was able to submit this cool new Lunar 4K wallpaper to the Lumina-Nature collection so that it'll be available for users to select.
Yeah, cool. Definitely for the desktop modding people, this is something to follow and publish their theme so that other people can also use it. What's next? Oh, a great thing, ZFS versus OpenZFS by our friend Michael Dexter. So this is over at IX Systems in their blog. And, well, why don't you read that, Alan? Because ZFS.
Sure. So Michael's answering the often question. He says, you've probably heard us mix the terms ZFS and OpenZFS. And he says, an explanation is long overdue. So here we're going to talk about how they are different. I admit that we geeks tend to get caught up in the nuts and bolts of enterprise storage and overlook the more obvious questions that users might have. You've probably noticed that on this blog and in the FreeNAS blog, we refer to ZFS and OpenZFS seemingly at random when I'm talking about the amazing file system that is the heart of FreeNAS and many other storage products that IX sells. So I'll do my best to clarify what exactly these two terms refer to. From its inception, ZFS was referred to as the zettabyte file system, mostly because letter FS, almost all of them were taken, so Z was available, but developed at Sun Microsystems and published under the CDDL open source license in 2005 as part of the Open Solaris operating system. ZFS was and remains revolutionary for completely decoupling the file system from specialized storage hardware and even a specific computer platform. The portable nature and advanced features of ZFS led to its adoption on FreeBSD, Linux, Apple, and there's even that beta port to Windows now. FreeBSD shipped with ZFS in the 7.0 release back in 2008 or so. For the first time, ZFS empowered users of any budget with enterprise-class scalability and data integrity and management features like checksumming, compression, snapshotting, and the features remain unrivaled at any price to this day. On any ZFS platform, administrators use the zpool and ZFS utilities to configure and manage their storage devices and file systems respectively. Both commands employ a user-friendly syntax with verbs like ZFS create and then specifying what you want to create. And I welcome you to watch an appropriately titled webinar, Why We Love ZFS and You Should Too, and some other links I have there. He says, yes, ZFS is really as good as people say it is. After enjoying nearly a decade of refinement by a growing group of developers around the world, ZFS became the property of database vendor Oracle, which ceased public development of both ZFS and OpenSolaris back in 2010. Disappointed but undeterred, a group of OpenSolaris users and developers forked the last public release of OpenSolaris and created the Illumos project. To this day, Illumos represents the official upstream home of the open source OpenSolaris technologies like dtrace and ZFS. The Illumos project enjoys healthy vendor and user participation, but the portable nature and compelling features of ZFS soon produced far more ZFS users than Illumos users around the world. While most, if not all, users of Illumos and its derivatives are ZFS users, the majority of ZFS users are not Illumos users, thanks in significant part to FreeNAS, which uses the FreeBSD operating system. This imbalance, plus several successful ZFS Day events, led to ZFS co-founder Matt Ahrens to create a group of ZFS developers and announce the OpenZFS project, which would remain a part of the Illumos codebase, but would be free to coordinate development efforts and events around the world for everyone's favorite file system. ZFS Day has grown into a 2-day OpenZFS Developer Summit and is stronger than ever, a testament to the passion and dedication of the community. So while Oracle has steadily continued to develop its own proprietary branch of ZFS, and Matt Ahrens points out that over 50% of the original OpenSolaris ZFS code has been replaced in OpenZFS with new community contributions, this means that there are sadly two politically and technologically incompatible branches of ZFS, but fortunately OpenZFS is order of magnitudes more popular thanks to its open nature. The two projects should be referred to as Oracle ZFS and OpenZFS to distinguish them in different efforts, but users still type the ZFS command either way. So ZFS basically refers to the technology, and then there are two versions, Oracle ZFS, and OpenZFS. So hopefully that helps people understand a little bit. It's mostly that I just don't remember to type OpenZFS all the time, and it's more typing.
Yeah. And I mean, IX systems and
ZFS is the file system. OpenZFS is the project.
That helps to distinguish that. And IX Systems and Delphix and the FreeBSD Foundation are partnering up to extend FreeBSD with the OpenZFS RAID Z online expansion project that we announced
that will
last year.
Go in as part of OpenZFS and be available in all the derivatives. So that same feature will be available on Linux and OS X and Windows as it merges into OpenZFS from FreeBSD.
Yeah, and this is a great way of giving back to ZFS and extending the functionality, and everyone benefits from that. So, time for our BSD bits this week. We have a bunch of stuff collected, and we're going right into it with explaining the shell. So this is over at explainshell.com. And you see a little input menu like in the old days of the Google browser or the Google web search. And there you can enter basically a shell command. And there are a couple of examples down there. And as you enter, let's type ls-la, for example, and then hit explain. Then it will tell you, well, what the first part does, well, list directory contents in this case, what the L switch does, and what the A switch does. So this is
I had
cool.
a slightly more complex example off the front page there of using cut. So can't quite see the lines, but cut will remove display only a certain column from the output. -D sets the delimiter, so we're going to delimit on space. -F1 provides the list of fields we want to use. So this shows only the first field, so everything before the first space from this log file, then pipes it into unique -C, which if we scroll down a little bit, you can see -C will count how many times the same input. So it will collapse all of the ones that are the same and give a count, and then sort -N will sort them numerically, and so you'll get a list of the IP addresses from the log file sorted by the ones that show up the most.
Yeah, this is totally dynamic. You can play around with this. You can even switch the theme to a dark theme if you're doing this at night. And try it out and get yourself enlightened in case you want to try out this shell command before you execute it and see what it does.
Yes, it's an interesting way of doing syntactic help inline.
Yep. Cool. Explainshell.com. Check it out and make sure that you never enter something unknown into your terminal. Next up is OpenSense 18.1 release is out. Whoa, that was kind of a scary image here. I just clicked on the website.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of naming releases. I find it kind of funny.
Okay, I was just surprised why that animal is there.
Giant gecko.
Okay, but they list a bunch of stuff that's new since the last version, and certainly there is a bunch of stuff new in there. Make sure to read the full release notes and update your OpenSense box to the newer version. And we have two news from our friend Michael W. Lucas. He's busy writing books and other stuff. SSH Mastery 2nd edition copy edits are back in this first item.
Yeah, he says, my copy editor returned the corrected manuscript for SSH Mastery 2nd edition to me last night. You should be able to buy the book within the next couple of weeks. In unrelated news, the first draft of Michael W. Lucas's secret book is coming along nicely. It'll be the shortest mastery book I've ever written, but at some horrific moment in your professional career, you'll be desperately glad to have it. Still curious what's going on over there.
I have no idea, but I certainly make sure to buy it once it's out. Going into the next item already, sponsoring a scam. So this sounds interesting, coming from Michael W. Lucas, more or less. So he's apparently writing a multi-Unix technology book that doesn't have a title yet. Well, okay, it has a title, but he's not saying what it is. The reasons why will be obvious once the book comes out. So we don't know. We have no idea. It'll be out before May, and his MWL secret book, as he calls it, will be fairly short, about 15,000 words, about half the size of Pseudo Mastery. It's a tech novella, as it were, and as such it will be less expensive than other mastery books. And when you find out what the book is, you'll probably groan and roll your eyes, or send hate mail, or wonder why it hasn't existed until now. Then the need is so obvious, and a whole bunch of you don't know the topic at all. And he did a Twitter poll, apparently, asking to offer sponsorship, if anyone is interested. And well, reactions were widely split between, no, you're an idiot, and yes, you're a maniac. He has mixed feelings on offering sponsorships because, well, this really is a pig in a poke. We don't know what you get. But for those who are adventurous, they can sponsor print editions and ebook editions. And yes, I already did the ebook edition sponsoring. And he has a little piece of cover art for us to think about and guess what this might be about. And yeah, this, as he mentioned, the whole thing might be complete rid-off. P.T. Barnum would approve. Yeah, there's a sucker born every minute, but none of them ever dies. And that's why the rates are at usual tech book sponsorship rates, because if you want in on a scam, you want all in. And let me say that in advance, I'm sorry. Oh, this is typo, typically Michael Lucas.
Yes. I'm very curious what title this book is going to be.
Yeah, I'm just waiting until May, and then we'll be either surprised or like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. But it's for a good cause. It's certainly going into the right hands, the money. Okay, next up, meetup time. So there's one in the for Bayfuck, yeah, what way? Bay Area BSD user group on February 8th, 2018. So this is the live episode recorded on the 2nd of February, so tomorrow, or yesterday if you watch it on Friday. It's a little bit short notice, but if you're in the area, make sure to get there. It's at Netflix, so this might be something in their campus for you. You've never been to their location before. And they have instructions how to get to the building and find the right parking spot and the room itself. And yeah, they also have a schedule there. So introductions, of course, a couple of announcements, and pizza breaks. And they have some speaking slots for people who want to present something. And they also have a tech talk and some social time. So seems like a nice way to spend the evening.
Yep. And it's automatically scheduled on meetup.com there for the second Thursday of every month. So it's open and available. So I would go if I was around. I've been to the Netflix campus for Dev Summit late last year, and it was a very nice campus. They have a nice way of setting it up.
I can imagine.
So I recommend checking it out.
Yep. But that's not the last meetup we're covering today. We also have a BSD user group meeting in Stockholm, the second one on March 22nd at 5:30 till roughly 9. So if you haven't been to the first one, I recommend to go to the second one, because why not? If you're in the Stockholm area or in Sweden and can make the time, check out the Stockholm meetup for BSD aficionados. And they will publish the program once it's closer to being finished. And it's in the B3 IT offices in central Stockholm, so easy to reach. I think that's close to the train station even. And yeah, hope to see many people there. Oh, already 22 people have subscribed to appear. Mm-hmm. Excellent. This is growing. Cool. Good. And we have FreeBSD flavored talks from linuxconf.au. One called You Can't Unit Test C, right? And a brief history of I/O. Isn't the last one from Benno Rice? If I
both
remember
are from Benno Rice.
Both are excellent. Mm-hmm. Why give one talk if you can give two?
Well, if you're going to go all the way from Seattle to Australia to give a talk, you might as well do two while you're there.
Certainly, yeah, cool. Yeah, check those out, and maybe some of the other talks are also of interest to you. So definitely something to watch. And yes, the EuroBSDCon 2018 website is finally up, providing dates when the conference is going to happen.
I thought Bernard said he removed the picture of coffee for no reason.
Well, coffee is hopefully a part of the conference. Otherwise, there will be riots. Not from me and you, but
Yes.
certainly
But yes,
there will be coffee, I hope.
it will be September 20th to 23rd at the Polytechnic University Bucharest in Romania. The first 2 days, as usual, will be Dev Summit and tutorials, and the second 2 days, the main track of talks.
Yep, and they will, of course, update the website as more information is available. But the building already looks interesting enough to go.
And keep an eye out for the call for papers. Start thinking now about what you would give your talk about.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Don't wait too long. Come up with a nice topic that people are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And submit it when it's open. And we'll mention it on the show when that can be done. And last but not least,
we have BeehiveCon. So that will be on March 9th, which is Friday. So this is during the tutorials section of HBSDCon.
Yeah, the second day.
March 9th from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. At the IIJ building, which is just down the hill from the main venue. BeehiveCon is the only conference completely dedicated to BSD hypervisors and isolation environments, including FreeBSD Beehive, Zen on FreeBSD and NetBSD, jails on FreeBSD, OpenBSD's VMM, etc.
Great, yeah, I hope to be there. Otherwise, I'll just wait for next year. But certainly there will be. Didn't we also do recordings from last year for BeehiveCon?
Yep, there should be recordings of all of the talks.
Excellent. Yeah, then I'm not missing much in case I have to teach my tutorials on that day.
Yep, there's also links to PDFs and such for all the talks going back to 2014 at the first BeehiveCon.
Michael Dexter did a good job to document all of these, and I'm helping him a little bit with organizing and getting the schedule complete and, some of the behind-the-scenes work.
Yes. So if you're going to be in Tokyo, you might as well check this out. I have a bit of an informal schedule, but there'll be some scheduled talks, some scheduled time for open discussion, and for people to ask questions and so on, and then some more talks, and then some more open discussion.
Are we also
seeing both so that we have time to talk and not just sit there and listen all day, but at the same time make sure that we're not just left with 4 hours to talk and we get bored of that after 2 hours and then just sit around or leave. So by mixing it up, we get this bit of structure and a bit of freedom at the same time, and it looks like it should be a good conference.
Oh yeah,
or mini conference or whatever.
Are we also seeing a return of the work in progress session?
Probably, and AsiaBSDCon itself will probably have a work in progress session at the end.
Excellent, because that is a good way of seeing what the other BSDs are doing or what other people in general are doing.
Yes, plus last year there was a tank running FreeBSD, so you never know what you're going to see.
A small one. Okay, that's pretty much it for our Beastie Bits this week. Before we go into our feedback and questions section, we should mention our sponsor for that segment, which is Tarsnap, of course. Colin Percival created the online backups for the truly paranoid, and having a backup copy is always important, but storing it in the cloud might be difficult. But the Tarsnap software makes it easy, and it stores only the encrypted parts in the cloud, so no one else can read it unless you have the decryption key, which hopefully never leave your machine.
Yeah, it's the only backup software where you get the source code for the client and can make sure that everything's encrypted properly before it goes out to the cloud, but you don't have to worry about it after that. All the other commercial backup services are not going to give you access to the source code of the client, and that automatically means you can't trust them to do it properly. As Benedict likes to say sometimes, trust but verify, and you can't verify if you don't have the source code.
Surely, and if you don't back up that much, you don't have to pay Tarsnap that much. Just charge your account with $5, and that's a pizza.
Yes. In particular, because it's pay as you go, you don't get a surprise bill later. You put money in your account, you use it. When the money runs out, you can put more money in. But you're never going to get a bill saying, hey, you owe us all this money because you backed stuff up and didn't notice or something. It means that you're completely protected from unexpected costs.
Yeah. And there are multiple clients available for various operating systems, the Linuxes, the BSDs, macOS, and also Windows. Mm-hmm. So no one can say, oh, I can't use Tarsnap. I wish I could because I'm running this crazy other operating system. No, pretty much everyone can benefit from Tarsnap, and having backups is always a good idea. And if it's as easy as doing Tarsnap backups, then by all means, do that. Okay, feedback and questions time. Mm-hmm. The first one is Thomas with FreeBSD installer improvements. So he writes, you would have liked if the installer notices that you are installing ZFS on root without parity and asks if you wish to add more copies of the data. So his use case was his NAS. The system is on a single 16 gigabyte USB flash drive and enough for 2 copies of data. So when his unknown quality flash stick starts to mess it up, it can fix problems, notify him, and can also add a new stick.
That's not entirely unreasonable, but at the same time, I'm not sure I want to encourage the behavior of using a single disk and hoping that copies equal 2 is going to protect you. Most disk failures nowadays aren't a single sector having a problem. It's the whole disk stopped working. And I wouldn't want to give people the impression that they're protected when they're not. But at the same time, as is FreeBSD's policy, it's tools, not policy. And, we don't want to stop you from doing something silly because it would also stop you from doing something clever. I just don't think copies equals 2 is actually that clever. But it's not an unreasonable request. The hardest problem is working it into the installer in such a way that it fits naturally and isn't confusing. There's already too many options in there, and I'm still trying to figure out how to rework it to make it more
not overwhelmed.
I need to look at some of the stuff Illumos does to see where it's different and whether their way makes more sense.
I think it was back in BSD Cambridge in August when we talked about having a separate installer or an option for servers and laptop installs. So this would guide you in a different menu where you can select different options. At one point I had
the idea of a profile-based installer. So when the installer starts, you would select what type of machine it was. Laptop, desktop, server, embedded, or custom, or something like that. And that would define a bunch of default settings and kind of go from there. But even there, you quickly get into, it's like, well, on my laptop, maybe I want UFS, maybe I want ZFS. And we don't want to take any options away. So I don't know. Still thinking about it. I got to look at some of the stuff Baptiste sent me on alternative graphics interfaces so we can get rid of dialogue as well.
Oh, yeah. As a dependency.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a good suggestion, and we consider it and make sure that, well, you can definitely do the drop into the shell after the installation is done and do the copies equals 2 setting manually.
Well, but if you do that, all the files that were installed will not be copies equals 2.
Right. It only affects the files written after that.
Generally, you're going to have to do the drop to the shell mode and set it before you do the install. There's not really a way around that. Although another option is to use ZFS send to basically send a copy of your system to a second boot environment that does have copies equals 2 if you have enough free space.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, thanks for the suggestion. Next up is Mohammed by having a question or a suggestion. Yeah, it's more like a question. FreeBSD 11 installation from a read-only rescue disk. So he writes, hello and Happy New Year. same to you. A bit late, but yeah, the way we assemble these questions might become a little bit late. So yeah, he's been a DigitalOcean user for years now, but sometimes he needs a dedicated server. He deals with 2 dedicated server providers in Europe. They have an automated installation procedure, but he would rather do it himself. Up until recently, he's been using only 10.3 with BSD install from Rescue Disk, which worked well. But ever since FreeBSD 11 came out and he started to upgrade to that, he couldn't finish the installation due to some missing manifest file.
I'm guessing that was a change in their read-only rescue image, but we'll get to that in a second.
Okay. With the first provider, he writes, the Rescue Disk root is writable, so he could just download manifest from a FreeBSD mirror, and would go doing by his business. But with the second host, the root is read-only, so he can't create user FreeBSD-dist or download the manifest.
So what I recommend there is do a tempfs mount. So mount -t tempfs, and then the device is tempfs, and the destination is a directory like user FreeBSD-dist, and that will create a memory file system, which you can then write all the files into. Even if the disk image is read-only, the new tempfs file system will be read-write, and you'll be able to throw the manifest file and the other files into the FreeBSD-dist. Although, if you don't have a manifest file in the install image, BSD install should already be downloading it, I thought. But it's what it uses to verify the checksums, and it usually prefers to have a copy locally.
Is there a reason why it's not included? Was it just
the
left
provider's
out, or?
making this image, not us. It's not a FreeBSD image, so
Okay.
I don't know why they chose not to.
Okay. But he writes, according to the BSD install man page on freebsd.org, he should be able to set BSD install dist here to a temporary location, which you said, the tempfs, and BSD install would know to fetch the files from there. But sadly, that didn't work. The environment variable has no effect. While he's
Check the way you're setting it. Also, just notice by default it's C shell, not SH, so the way you set a variable is slightly different. But likely just env space variable equals value space BSD install will start it with the right variable. And yes, that should work. So, for example, if USR is read-only and you can't create a FreeBSD-dist directory, usually on the installer images /tmp is read-write, but very small. But you can create the empty directory there and then, again, mount the tempfs and load the files into there, the tar files and the manifest, and then run your BSD install with the distr environment variable pointing to /tmp/FreeBSD-dist.
Yeah, so what he's currently doing is installing 10.3 and then upgrading to 11.1, which is very time-consuming. And yeah, that you pretty much answered that one. He writes, thank you so much for all we do. He donated to the FreeBSD Foundation last week because of the podcast and everything else we do. Yeah, thank you for that. We appreciate the feedback and the money for the foundation. Cool. Yeah. So we hope to provided you a bunch of options that you can actually install the system that you like on your cloud provider. And or you should also get in contact to them and ask them why they leave out the manifest and that you have these problems, because they are also interested.
You can also run into the problem that the manifest will be for whatever version the rescue image is. So if the rescue image is 11.0 and you want to install 11.1, you need a different manifest anyway.
True, yeah. But I think the cloud providers are open to these kinds of suggestions and at least be aware of these issues that people have. Okay, moving on to Stan with a follow-up on guide that we covered a couple of episodes ago. Oh yeah, this is regarding episode 225, the article that we had on what was that about? The review bargain, FreeBSD ZFS box. Here it goes. The Dell FS12-NV7. There is no available bidding, at least, going on eBay currently. He'd like to follow along with this project, and can we point him at the vendor we implied there in the article? I think you should contact the
blog author.
Yeah. And that should either make it possible to find someone who has these machines or, get in touch with a blog author. Okay, but it's good that people follow along some of the stuff that we report and that it piques their interest.
The HP microserver or whatever is very popular for that type of thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And last question.
Last question. Yalal wrote a couple of questions to us. He writes, "Hello, Alan and Benedict. Many thanks for the great show. I have a couple of questions. First one. I second that Steve mentioned in episode 223 about VirtualBox not being very solid in FreeBSD, so he thinks their focus should shift towards Beehive and VMM instead. For that, what does one need to know to become a virtualization developer? All the books talk about administration, virtualization environments, but not developing them. For example, what does one need to do to add support for new guest OS? Appreciate if you could shed some light on the subject and point to any resources that might help."
Generally for guest OSs, there's not much that should need to be added, although there might be specific instructions or something that it's doing that make that certain guest OS not work. But now that Beehive has the EFI firmware and the EFI CSM firmware, it's pretty much able to boot any operating system I can think of. The biggest problem with older operating systems is that Beehive only supports AHCI, which is a relatively modern storage framework. That'd be like 2008 and later, maybe a bit earlier than that. Then supports VirtIO, which is a bit newer than that. So running Windows 98 isn't an option. You'd need some kind of like IDE emulation, which doesn't exist. And so I think even XP is slightly difficult because of that. But most stuff that's modern should just work. But there's always lots of things. I'm not a virtualization developer, so I don't know one of the answers there, but it's more...
Well, there's a couple of things you can do. You could subscribe to the virtualization mailing list on freebsd.org or any other hypervisor, VMM on OpenBSD. And you could also look up the Beehive Dev account on Twitter, which has a bunch of OpenZFS, Beehive developers there, and ask questions. They're pretty much open to contributions and for people who want to work in virtualization environments. And so you can also see what's currently being discussed, what kind of problems they're facing, and maybe you can provide a fix for that. Or you look at the bug trackers of these projects and see whether there's something that you can fix or contribute. And this is a way to gradually get into the Beehive or whatever hypervisor you're trying to work with as a virtualization developer.
In the end, a lot of it is low-level knowledge about the architecture. So Beehive, that would be a lot of knowledge of some of the special features that Intel and AMD have for supporting virtualization and making proper use of those. But also, part of Beehive's goal is to avoid emulating a lot of these old common devices. And that's a bit of a trade-off sometimes.
Yep. But I like the idea that you want to contribute in this way, and hopefully we can open a door for you so that you can contribute to the virtualization efforts. Okay, his second question. What is the state of FreeBSD's highly available storage, or HAST? As it doesn't seem to be mentioned on the show very often, it is still viable, being developed, and did ZFS features replace the need for it?
So HAST and ZFS are definitely very different things. So HAST is more like Linux's DRDB. It's block level replication between multiple machines. The idea is that you basically end up with, a mirror, where the second disk in the mirror is actually a different physical machine. I don't know that there's much active development at the moment, but I have the impression that HAST works for what it was meant for. It just isn't necessarily what people always wish it was. It's more about mirroring a hard drive to a remote system, and when combined with CARP or UCARP, can handle failover there. When you try to mix it with ZFS, it gets slightly more complicated in that you have to make sure that ZFS isn't imported on both sides at the same time. But this is getting easier now that in the near future, ZFS will have multi-mount protection, where it will actually detect that the other machine is still using the ZFS and deal with that. Of course, you can still end up if with a network outage or something that causes the machines to enter a split brain mode, where they both think they're master and are both making changes to the disk, and then you can't reconcile those changes. You have to pick one of the two as the new master and sync the changes back to the other one.
Yep.
There's not much way around that, though. So HAST is still there and good. It's a block level replication system, not a clustering system.
Right. Or for systems that can't run ZFS for whatever reason, be it embedded or UFS only, this is still a viable solution. It's not broken.
Yes, the nice thing
works.
about HAST is it doesn't care what file system you run on top of it.
Yep. Okay, hope they answered that part of your question. And the third and last question he has, wouldn't it be nice if IX systems could build PCs and laptops that are 100% compatible with free operating systems, like the major ones at least? So people don't have to worry about BIOSes, drivers, and the likes when shopping for a computer to run their favorite operating system on. They can be built to order as well as like the server.
That's really complicated. The biggest problem is, you still actually do end up having to worry about BIOSes. You'd have to get a BIOS from somewhere and so on. Or even with Wi-Fi, they buy some Wi-Fi chips and ship some laptops with it. And then now that manufacturer doesn't make that Wi-Fi chip anymore and they have to use a different one. And so now you end up with the second generation of laptops not being the same, or rather the same model of laptop just purchased later and it doesn't have the same wireless. And you run into other problems there. Or things seem to work and then they don't, and so on. And especially once you let people do custom build to order type things, then you're supporting a much larger variation of configurations. Whereas if every one of the laptops is the same, there's a lot of cost savings. A lot of the types of parts that you're talking about to build a laptop like that, you can't buy them in less than units of 10,000. And, IX, if they're brand new to selling laptops, getting 10,000 of every component and trying to build laptops out of it is going to be really complicated, especially when everybody's going to want a slightly different model of laptop. The economies of scale just make that very difficult.
Yeah. Although I like the idea that with the success IX had in the server space, that they should now look into the laptop space, but it's a different market.
Desktop, they can build a desktop. Like Michael Lucas's desktop is an IX system. Mine
sure.
could have been, I suppose. It's a little specific because I was putting some video editing stuff into it, but
yeah. But if you're generally in the market for a laptop, then you might want to check out the wiki freebsd.org/laptops page, where there's a bunch of laptop models and vendors listed, and with the compatibility, what works, what didn't, and then you can make a more educated buying decision based on the checklist that they have. So whether sound works, or Wi-Fi, or Ethernet, or the graphics stack. So this is a comprehensive list that's been building up over the years.
Yeah, but you'll notice heavy skew towards Lenovo because they have the best reputation for working. I know a couple of people that have Lenovo X270s that are working very nicely.
Yep, but there are also a couple of free or independent laptop vendors around. I remember the one that George and Colin Percival have.
The System 76?
Yeah.
Although
so this is
George ended up on a X270 in the end, I think.
Yeah, he switched again. But, I mean, depends on what kind of use case you use that laptop for. It might fit your needs. So it's not totally out of the world, but the best people to answer that question is the IX folks themselves. And why don't you drop that question to those people and see what they answer? Maybe it's been proposed to them already. Be that as it may, we hope to answer all your questions, and we hope you like the show, because this one is coming to an end now. But before we say goodbye, we want to mention that you should send us anything that you found about BSD, questions, comments, show notes, ideas, or something for the feedback and questions section, because we can never have enough. Send all that to feedback@bsdnow.tv.
Exactly. So we look forward to seeing you next time and look forward to getting your feedback on stories and questions.
Yeah, the more we have, the more interesting it is for the BSD community at large.
See you next week.